In this episode, I head out into space to chat with Mike about pre-made adventures for M-Space, and I talk about all things Christmas. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 31, New Adventures Beyond the Final Frontier. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I am your host, Inwils, and welcome to December. First of all, if you are listening from America, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. December always seems to be that month for celebrations. We have Christmas, New Year, and of course my birthday. Woohoo! Another birthday. Seems like it was only yesterday that I was celebrating being 40. The possible downside of having all these holidays is that they can interrupt our normal schedule of gaming. As part of my ever-growing Twitch channel, I try to achieve what I call stream every day in December, or Streammas. I grabbed the idea from YouTubers that blog every day in December, but because generally my life is just work and very little of anything else, then I decided to stream instead. I even used my limited musical talent and created a multi-track song to accompany the challenge. Okay, allow me a small amount of self-promotion. Here it is. I'll be streaming each day. I'll be streaming every day in December all the way.
Hashtag.
I'll be streaming each day. I'll be streaming every day in December, all the way.
Hashtag stream_MAS. Streammas.
I have in the past actually played seasonal themed adventures over Christmas instead of our usual gaming sessions. I have to say that my favourite one was based on the rule set Car Wars. I'm not sure if anyone else remembers the game, but in the seasonal version of it you were armed with Santa sleighs and had to try to take out the competition while flying through the skies. With your ammunition being restricted to snowballs and presents, it was a non-lethal battle, but that didn't stop everyone taking it very seriously. Have you ever run or participated in a seasonal adventure? If you have, then do let me know on the Tapper Talk forums or in the Discord channel. I really would like to hear all about them. And talking about forums and Discord channel, if you would like to contribute to the podcast, then why not drop me an email or message and let me know what you would like to cover. I'm always looking for reviews or interviews or just chats with people. So if you are interested, then email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the various forums I frequent and on the Discord. If you follow my content on YouTube, you will be aware that we are playing 2 adventures in Mythras, the fantasy setting, and then 2 in M-Space, the science fiction setting. We have been enjoying the new sci-fi setting a lot, and character development is going really well. However, whenever you start a new campaign or rule set, there is that difficulty of deciding where to start. This is when pre-made adventures can be so beneficial, and when Mike asked to come along and chat about his pre-made adventure Elevation, I quickly donned my spacesuit, headed down to the nearest airlock and space hopped over to his ship to hear all about the adventure and how it could be integrated into a new or existing campaign. So, as the airlock closes, I welcome Mike back to the podcast.
My name is Mike Larimore. I'm a freelance writer. I've written Destin, but I also have written Elevation for MSpace.
Fantastic. And we're all looking forward to Destin coming out. I have to say that right at the beginning. But yeah, so you've written Elevation. So what is Elevation? That would be a good place.
One is a very, very, very long-running series of characters that's kind of evolved into several campaigns throughout my 30-plus years of role-playing games. Actually, my very first character in Traveller, the original publication of Traveller, was Marcus Arthur, who's one of the main characters in this book. And over the years, it's kind of evolved to taking different steps along the way. So this is kind of the most recent version. The idea behind it was, in many science fiction, TV shows, movies, books, there's always the benevolent space organization that is, they always have the great fleets of ships, and they have all the resources in the world and, this limitless source of money. And my idea was, what if you had something like the Federation from Star Trek, but they were broke? Things didn't quite work out as planned. The funding didn't come through. And, not to be too dystopian or negative, but if we think about it in terms of a real world situation, in many cases, these benevolent organizations aren't going to be as well funded as massive corporations and large entities like that. So that was kind of the idea behind it, was, the idea of this benevolent space organization that has kind of fallen on hard times, and the characters are members of it who are trying to elevate it, as it were, back to its former glory days.
And hence Elevation.
Yes.
So the adventure, I think it's called, is it the First Contact bit, isn't it? It's Elevation First Contact. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So go for it.
Oh, I was going to say that the whole premise of the organization Elevation was, there was this great explorer and space hero, and he had found a sentient species, a previously undiscovered species. And the way that the galaxy works is the most powerful species, called the Rajolans, who are merchants, and they have been out in space for quite some time, established a series of laws that whenever you found a sentient species, if they were at a certain progress level, that the Rajolans felt they could join the galactic community. Nice. Whoever made first contact would also get rights for trade. They would get a percentage of profits as they started to enter into the galactic community for a period of years. So there was kind of a business aspect of it, that finding a new species was actually very lucrative. So that's kind of where Elevation came in, is that a lot of corporations and other entities would come in, find a civilization, and exploit it. So they were the benevolent, peaceful, we're going to come in and do it the right way. We're going to come in and gradually introduce them and treat them fairly and help them to become part of this larger community and not take advantage of them.
I was just thinking about our own MSpace campaign, and we have it's called Core, which is the main sort of like company, corporation of research and exploration. But I really like the idea that I wish I'd had your idea and sort of like made it as if they was, fallen on hard times. That sounds a really interesting story dynamic that could actually produce some really interesting content. So the book's for MSpace, isn't it? That's correct.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And how adaptable do you think it would be for other people to use for other systems? Could it easily be adapted or not?
I think it could be. I think primarily my goal was to just introduce the setting, introduce some of the characters, introduce the ideas and the concepts. And I think it is very easily adapted. I think there is a guideline to adapt things from M Space into Traveler, for example.
Right.
I've actually talked to Clarence about that, about possibly doing, a version or do conversion notes for the games, that we could do. That's something we discussed. And I think I think any type of setting book, you could, if with a little elbow grease and a little work, you can take it and really bring it to any system that you want. And that's I think what the goal was here too, is just, this is, like I said, a long standing setting that, I've had a lot of players over the years that enjoyed, and I thought it'd be nice to put it out into the world, and Clarence was nice enough to let me do that.
Fantastic. And let's focus on the book, the PDF, and what's in there for anybody who's thinking, oh, what do I get? What's actually in the book?
The book, most of the first half of the book is just detailing the setting, talking about the organization, talking about its history, talking about its current status. But also we have some side notes and things in there to talk about playing in different eras of it. I have an idea that, I've had an idea that what if people wanted to play in the heyday? Because when the organization started, they were well funded. They had a fleet of ships. They had all the things they needed. They had the best technology. And what if you want to play in that era? You want to play something similar to a Star Trek type of campaign where you're going out and exploring the galaxy and you have lots of resources. Or you play the standard campaign where you're kind of scraping by with whatever technology is left. A lot of their equipment is outdated. Their personnel is minimal at this point. They've tried to hold on to whatever resources they still could, while the resources and monies are kind of dwindling away. So you're really kind of scraping together to kind of keep things going. So we talk about what kind of equipment is available. We give some examples and some new weapons, new armor, new standard equipment, a couple of new ships and vehicles, just to kind of set the setting, so you know what the story is about. We talk about the main species that are in the galaxy, the ones that are, have been discovered, the ones that are kind of the movers and the shakers. We have the circles, the organizations of the galaxy, the main groups the characters might encounter, might come into contact with or fight against, and just kind of give you all the details that you need if you're interested in the setting to take it whole cloth and just whatever, or just pick and choose what you like out of it and put it into play. Then there's 3 adventures in there. They kind of form a mini campaign talking about, kind of what we talked about, that it's an exploration based setting. So it's, the trials and tribulations of finding a potential planet that could have a sentient species that could actually be a turning point for the organization, trying to do what you need to do. There's oddly enough a bureaucratic challenge, something I never thought I would write. Basically a very tense paperwork scene. Trying to make that into something that's entertaining was a challenge. So hopefully it worked out. And eventually, coming, if everything works out as planned, getting to the point where you reach the species and have to negotiate and try to make contact with them. Hence why it's Elevation First Contact. Yeah. And there also is a free adventure, which is available if you're just interested in the setting. It kind of delves into a little bit. The Triton incident, which technically ties into the other 3 adventures that are in the main book. Then my things that I wanted to add is there's a kind of a bestiary in there of just a few that are specific to the setting, but most of them I try to make them generic so they could be adapted to any M Space game. Yeah. And my personal favorite thing, the random adventure generator table. I love a random adventure generator table because I know, probably like a lot of game masters, some days you have it all planned out. You have exactly what you want to do in mind. And there are other days where you've had a long week of work, or there's a lot going on in your personal life, or you didn't get a chance to sit down that week because there's a really good video game or something new on Netflix you've been watching. And you're like, oh, wow, it's gaming night. I need to come up with an idea. So
Yeah. And I was going to talk about this because in the book, they're called scenario hooks, I think. And there's actually 50 of them. I'm right, aren't I?
Yes. That was a challenge trying to come up with 50 adventures, but.
And it's interesting because when I used to play Traveller, there was a little booklet that was very similar to this that had a whole load of hooks. And I really like these hooks. And I think it's what you were saying there. If I didn't manage to get the adventure done or something else was going on, they're really nice and concise. And I like the way there's like a statement, but then there's a question. After it. And so did you think of all of these, all 50?
I would like to take credit for probably most of them. I did ask my friends in my gaming group for some suggestions along the way, because it just really, you come week to week. And I think like all of us, that we come up with our adventures and things like that. And I'm sure I recycle things at times, but coming up with 50 original ideas was definitely challenging. So I think there's probably, I maybe came up with 30 of them, I could say.
That's still good.
Yeah. So, and then my friends were generous enough to contribute some ideas and some suggestions and things that made it in. I think, not to go back to Destin, but I think, the background tables that we have in all the Mythras books, that one of the requests that Laws had made during that one was, we have the origins in that, and each one of those is 50. So we had to come up with 50 for like 10 different origins.
Yeah.
So like 500 different background events.
Wow.
So yeah. So this one was very fun to do. That I could say that it was a challenge for some of the stuff at Destiny, but this one was, and just even going back sometimes to adventures I'd run in the previous campaigns for what became Elevation, coming up with some new ideas. It's I think it's a fun thing to do,
and I think it's a really good resource because they're very succinct but actually stimulate your thoughts as a GM, and you can immediately think, oh yes, this could be this, it could be lead to that. I like the one that ends up saying, why is the robot so cheap?
Yeah.
And I really like that idea, because it's almost like high end. Yeah, but why? You mentioned beforehand about the circles. So they're a bit like the orders in Mythras, is that right? And they're sort of like corporations.
Yes, they are. I think that's the term that Clarence always uses in M Space for them. And they were kind of fun world building exercises, trying to come up with the different players. And even in there, there's suggestions in the sidebars about, okay, if you don't want to work for Elevation, what happens if you work for Crayson Industries, which is another major corporation that as of yet has not had a major presence in galactic affairs, but the management wants to. So you would be the ones trying to go out and establish them as a player outside of Earth. The Pirate Confederacy, do you want to be a pirate?
Yeah.
Either good or bad, like a privateer, or you want to be a full-on buccaneer going out and raiding ships and tossing people out the airlock, whatever you want to do.
Very much. And you mentioned it just then. I love the alternate timelines that come with each one of those circles. That, again, is a great wealth of possible ideas, for campaigns or one-off adventures. You mentioned the aliens. How fun was it to make up aliens for
that to me was also one of the most fun things, because a lot of the aliens that are in there are based on alien species that we've used in the private campaigns over the years, but I wanted to change them. I kind of fell into the trap that a lot of science fiction TV shows and things fall into, where they're all basically humans with bumpy foreheads or different skin colors, or and they just kind of all were very human centric. And I thought it would be more fun to try to change that around a little bit this time. A lot of that came from Dan and Jerome, my artists who I work with for this. I kind of let them go wild, and even that was some of the guidelines I said is, I don't know what I want them to look like. I just don't want them to look human.
Oh yeah.
And I think of like the Ark one, which are kind of pacifistic psionic aliens. And I had no idea what I wanted them to look like, but Jerome, I think, did that one, and he came up with these kind of almost insectoid, aliens that look completely non-human. And I think that's part of the fun, is that when you're going out exploring the galaxy, not everything's going to have 2 legs, 2 arms, and a general humanoid figure. And how do you deal with that? How do you play that alien, in terms of kind of coming up with their psychology and how they interact with other species. And I think the alien creation stuff that Clarence has in M Space is fantastic, and it's one of a great resource when you're creating your own setting, or for this specifically, and this was part of what him and I had discussed when we talked about the book, was that would be a very essential tool when you're doing this. If you're going out in the galaxy trying to find a new species, as a game master, you can use that to come up with one, or kind of spur some ideas if you don't really know what you want, or you maybe have a vague idea, using that and his system generators and all the different things in the main book to populate the galaxy, so that you can continue the campaign indefinitely.
And I think the tables in M Space for aliens, I really like them because it's a bit like what you were saying beforehand. Otherwise, I have this picture, this image, and all the aliens come out the same. But the tables really allow you to challenge your creation almost, to sort of think, oh, this is good, that's different. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they even have disadvantages for them as well, which is really good. What in Elevation, there's an attribute to the aliens called strangeness.
Yes.
What's that about?
It's basically, I think, about how different they are from a base humanity. I think that was kind of the idea behind it. It was the idea that, the Erusians, which are kind of almost canine-like, but they're basically humanoid, So when you're going out and you're encountering them as a human, which, by the way, that they were one, I just like the idea that they're a culture that was introduced to technology and media and just got lost in it.
Nice. Yeah.
And it was kind of, even in the book, we talk about that being a cautionary tale that, think of it for all of us too. Give yourself a couple of video game systems and a big TV and, a nice high-end computer, and how easy it is to get lost into virtual worlds. And they're the kind of the lesson in that. But, so there's a couple species in there which are more humanoid. So or the Rajolans, which are basically the gray aliens, that you hear of so much in terms of, our classic image of an alien. But then you have something like the Qatar, which are very alien and very menacing and don't think like humans and don't act like humans and are very antagonistic. And how do you deal with them? It's
I think I really have a good feel of all the aliens and how they've developed and how they would interact with explorers. And I think that's a reflection of how much thought has gone into them to make them, for want of a better word, realistic, and allowing the characters to interact with them and engage in them. So there's 3 scenarios, I think. Is that right?
Yes. 3 in the main book.
Yeah. So what's the general feel of those scenarios? Are they combat orientated or conflict? Tell us about those.
I really strived to make them adaptable to whatever the group is. I feel like, to me, I think growing up in the hobby, a lot of us are used to, the classic modules, growing up in Dungeons and Dragons, I can think of pretty much every early module that we played. It's pretty much go into this room, kill this, take its stuff, go into the next room, maybe avoid a trap, avoid this, kill its stuff. And I didn't really want that for this. There is combat if you choose, but there are also ways to get around that. There's a lot of exploration. There's some, detective work that you need to do in some cases. There's the second scenario where, it's the one I talked about, where you have the battle of bureaucracy, where you're dealing with alien cultures, Byzantine labyrinth of various, systems and paperwork and things. But part of that is also that you have to get your ship back because something has happened to it, and you need a part for it, and the part is in the hands of a corrupt pawn shop owner, basically.
Nice. Yeah.
And the only way to get the part is to have funding for to pay him.
Yeah.
And how you go about doing that is entirely up to the group. And that was kind of intentional, is the idea that you could just go and try to take the part by force. You could try to, earn it by legitimate means, by, going to work.
Fantastic.
And it plays into the idea that your organization does not have a lot of funding, so they can't exactly wire you the money for it. Yeah. Or, the other part of the scenario is the pawn shop owner, the broker, offers to let you, basically get the part if you help him with 3 different jobs, or a series of different jobs that he offers you. And each one of those is different. There's a heist, there's more of a combat encounter where you're shaking down a rival. So, you have a choice how you're going to do it. And you could even mix and match. You could go out and work at the docks for a couple of days to earn some money, but you could also do some of the pawn shop owner's jobs for him. So
fantastic. And of course, M Space has the, I say fantastic because I adore it. The conflict pool system that really works well with social interactions or interactions of any description. And
yes.
I think I'm right in that. I'm just trying to flip through my copy of my book. I think they're in there, aren't they? The examples of those extended conflicts.
I think that, to me, was one of my favorite parts, and I've said that Clarence many times. I think that was one of the greatest contributions he made to Mythras, is his conflict rules and his extended conflicts. So I really tried to have a lot of fun with that. And, so there's quite a few of them in each scenario. And it's a great way to, build tension, but also keep things simple. It's easy to, for example, if you're running a heist, it's very easy to have one bad roll destroy the whole thing. We can all think of times in adventures when we need to sneak past the guards, and everybody except that one player makes stealth checks, and that one failed roll pretty much messes it up for everybody.
Yeah.
And I really think the extended conflicts, not only is it a way of dealing with that in a nice, clean, abstract way that still maintains tension, but also gives each player an opportunity to contribute. And I tried to put that in there too. So if you're trying to break into somewhere, the character who's the tech wizard, who is not going to be good at sneaking into the building, they can still contribute to the overall conflict. The person who is the combat person, can go and, knock out a guard and still contribute to the conflict. It's a way of having everybody deal with the scenario in the best way they can.
Yeah. And I love the conflict, the extended conflict and the conflict pools and everything like that. And I really like how it develops away from what might have been solved before by a single role. And we use it, say, for example, trying to break a computer code when they don't have the password. That was something that the computer expert could do and work with someone else. And it really, a single role would not have added as much to that cracking of that code. But when it's an ongoing thing, and there's the time element as well, I think that this takes an hour or a round or a second.
Yeah. And you might only have so many roles to do it, or you might have, other complications, or, one approach might be a higher difficulty, but you might find a different approach that isn't, that is a better way of dealing with it. But you still have the option of doing those other roles. And I like that even in the main book, he even says you could do combat that way.
Yes.
Instead of going round to round, you could simply resolve a conflict with these, or combat with these as well, and that you have that option. And like you said, it adds tension, but also it doesn't become something where, I think of the classic example of, early editions of Shadowrun, where if you had somebody hacking into a system and they could spend the whole night just going through the system, and your street samurai, who is a combat monster, has to stand around and do nothing while, your hacker's going into the system for like an hour, dealing with that. And it's a clean, easy, it doesn't take up the whole night to do one extended conflict. It's something that can be done, very simply, very elegantly, and still have a lot of tension attached to it, which is, makes it each role count.
Yeah. As a GM and a playing group, we're still very new to the M Space campaign. Do you think Elevation would be a good starting point for people who are wanting to get into M Space and fly through the stars?
I think so. That was my intention, was to make it something where it's a setting that we have details, we have specifics about characters and organizations. But to me, personally, I like a world book that's still a toolkit.
Yes.
I like something that I can pick and choose from. I can take what I want. And that was my goal in writing this as well, is that it's supposed to be a setting that is ultimately your setting. If you want to use Elevation and you want to use it as written, that's fine. If you want to take it in a different direction, put in your own characters, put in your own ideas, change the ships around, whatever you want to do, that's your option. You want to use the, guitars, the bad guys, that's fine. You want to focus on them, or you want to introduce a whole new species, or you want to make, the Rajolans, instead of they're kind of neutral merchants, they are conquerors.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I want it to be something that people can come in and you can play the scenarios as written. If you're just starting, I think it's a good way to do that. Like I said, you could even have the introductory adventure that we have for free. That can be adapted to anything. That's a little murder mystery on a space station. But yeah, that was the goal, is something that you could take a setting, and the premise is very basic and very true to a lot of science fiction, is exploration. The galaxy is huge, it's vast, and even the advanced species that have spent a lot of time out in it still have explored the tiniest fraction of it. So there's so much more out there, and it's why we watch shows like Star Trek. It's why they persist to today, is that it's the idea of the unknown. The same thing like our ancestors did when they struck across the ocean, not knowing what was on the other side.
And I've read it, and Elevation, and I agree with you. There's so many. It's not prescriptive about how to do things or what to do. It has that freedom for both GMs to adapt it, but perhaps more importantly, those options that different players with different playing styles
Mhm.
could approach everything completely differently. But as a GM, you still got all that at your fingertips from the book.
Thank you. That's what my intention was. It's just
Yeah.
to, because not everybody wants to play the same. Not everybody. Some people want to load up on plasma rifles and go out and blast everything in sight. And some people are more interested in the politics and the interactions.
Yeah.
And both of those work just fine with this.
I'm assuming at this point that you have GM'd the adventures.
I have, yes.
Yeah. And did they go well?
Yeah, they did actually. I think that to me is also the most fun part about GMing is that, when you have something written on page, and like I said, I tried to make it so the adventures, are not a railroad, where you have a single track and that's the only, way you can go in it. But my players always manage to find ways to go completely off the rails, no matter what, my intentions are, plans are. And that was the case when we ran them too, is, it's something where, to me, that's the most fun about it, is that I like a scenario, and why personally, I don't use a lot of published adventures is because I like the free form. I like, something where you give me a guideline, you give me some ideas and some characters and some locations, and then let us go wild and let us do
exactly
follow where they go. So,
and I think that from coming from a Dungeons and Dragons background, when everything was very linear, that I felt, and moving to Mythras and M Space as well, I feel that my own adventure design has changed dramatically because both systems allow for such variation of actions and approaches that you can't write a very set structure for a scenario anymore with the rule sets, because players just, they have that capacity to do what they want, and the world accommodates that very much so.
I agree. And that's I think where it's the most fun is where you as a game master can sit back and let them just explore the world.
Yeah.
And that to me with this too is, I think the simplest adventure in this would be, pick a star and let's go there and see what's there.
Very much. You mentioned another adventure that could come before this. Is that right? Is it? Did you say it was a downloadable adventure that?
Yeah. There's a free adventure on Drive-Thru called the Triton Incident. It's an introductory elevation at scenario. It is. It talks a little bit about the background. If it's something where you're interested in learning more about it, but you don't want to, drop the money on it yet. Like I said, it's free to anybody.
It's very good. It is very good.
Thank you. And that's just it. And it does tie in fact, actually, it very much ties into the scenarios, or can tie into the scenarios that are in the main elevation book. It's also something where, like I said, you could easily adapt it to any campaign. It doesn't have to necessarily take place in the elevation. It's just, like I said, a murder mystery on a space station. So you can easily pull that into whatever campaign you want, as something as a one-off scenario or the start to something else.
Yeah. And what about the future then, Mike? What's coming out? Is there? I know Destined is in the future.
Slowly but surely, Destin is coming together. So as I think Law said before, I think we're still aiming for probably the beginning of the new year. For that. And as far as elevation, I have talked to Clarence about this. There's no firm plans, but I can say that I've written some things. One of my favorite parts of the book personally was there's a thing called small jobs. In the second scenario, where it's basically, like I said, you have the option of just going out and doing these little mini scenarios within the main adventure to earn money, to get the ship part that you need. And my idea was that we would have a book of just one-off scenarios. Some maybe even taking from the scenario generator. I have a list of scenarios. I've started writing a few of them. My personal favorite is right now is trying to prevent an assassination while you're free falling down a space elevator from orbit.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's the one I've been writing the most of. But I have a good friend, Bill, who helped a lot with this book. He's writing a couple scenarios. Just kind of, and like I said, they're all, there's no overarching narrative. It's not really a campaign, but to me, I think that's the whole point of Elevation, is that, there is an overall goal to try to help the organization and get it back on its feet to where it once was. But that the fun part about that is all the things that happen in between.
Yeah.
The little weird things that you encounter, the strange characters, the mining colonies in peril, and strange sects of alien cultures that are having strange behaviors and weird things going on. All the fun stuff that you can encounter just by going out in the galaxy and seeing what's there.
I love that idea of small jobs, those little scenarios, because they're so easy to slip in to campaigns, either in between main adventures or as subplots within one. So I definitely will be looking out for that.
Thank you. And to me, it's the things we didn't really get to touch on that much in the book. The other circles, like what about the pirates? What about the Table of Avalon? All these other groups that we mention and we talk about in the book a little bit, but they weren't the focus of the adventures. So, we have adventures about them, or exploring the different alien species, in ways. With the other one that I had was, the guitar, the kind of very aggressive species. What happens when you encounter one that maybe needs your help?
Very much so. Fantastic.
How can that change your relationship with them, or just with that individual? So, it's about that. That's the goal, is to kind of just further expand on the setting, give some other jumping off points, give some things that could be a fun, 3 or 4 session adventure, or something that you could expand and build into a campaign all its own.
It's absolute. It really is a fantastic starting adventure, as well as the free one. And anybody who's interested in starting their own M-Space campaign, it's something that I would strongly recommend. Do you have your final sales pitch for anybody who's like on the fence about it at the moment? What would you say to them?
I'd say if you like exploration science fiction, if you're interested in a setting that's kind of very free form, very sandboxy, that you can do what you will, and if you have that kind of group that a lot of us like, the lovable losers who are barely scraping by. And I think, how many Traveler campaigns, how many science fiction campaigns? I think of shows like Firefly, where, that was definitely an influence on this too, is the idea of this, ragtag group of people who are just trying to survive day to day, out in the galaxy, and, getting embroiled in things that are probably larger than them, but they still manage to find a way through. That's the goal of this, is just that kind of campaign where you're just always on the edge, but always finding something new and fascinating.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to the podcast. I really do appreciate it. And as always, I always get inspired to go out, and I already have the book, but to especially those 50 adventure hooks, I think they're just wonderful. So thank you for coming along and talking with us.
Thank
today.
you. I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, for a wonderful discussion. And if you fancy checking out both the Introductory Adventure and Elevate, then you can buy them via the drivethrurpg.com website. Links are in the show notes. And that's it. Another episode of Mythras Matters completed. Don't forget, you can check out all my content by following my YouTube channel and the campaign areas on World Anvil. I really appreciate your support, so do check out the Tapper Talk forums and the Discord. There are some great people there sharing their ideas within the discussions. So until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all in the new year in January. I would like to take this opportunity to wish you all a great Christmas with lots of design mechanism purchases waiting for you under the tree. Until January, I hope that all your pose rolls succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. Happy Christmas. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you.